Saturday, and we are back from the honeymoon, from a wild, magical week for episode 182 on the Paradigm Ship, baby. But not one, but two dynamic, unbelievable, legendary guests on, and I couldn't be more pumped. And we're back at it, and it feels great to be back. So let Dave and I know how you guys are feeling in the chats, what you're most pumped about, what you're grateful for, and let's bring on Big Dave and let's get this party started. Yes? Okay, great. And everything in between. Here he is.
Hello. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
I enjoyed your wedding immensely. My wife enjoyed everybody I enjoyed meeting your family and Alessia's family. What a beautiful event for a beautiful, beautiful marriage, man. That was awesome.
Thank you. And thank you for being there to celebrate. And thank you for your angelic voice, which you downplayed because it was beautiful.
I was honored to do the Hamotzi. Nobody's ever asked me to do that. And as you know, my wife did not want me to sing the Hamotzi. She just wanted me to say the prayer. But I went for it. And if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do my best, even if my basement is very low, as my voice is very low and my singing voice is even lower. But hopefully I didn't see anybody going like this. But I'm sure some people felt like it.
No. It was great content. I'm going to send you a video after. It was actually really awesome, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Wow. You got to show up, Craig. And you and I have talked about this. And as I've been traveling around and people use you as the example of, can you do for me what you've done for Craig Siegel? I've seen just amazing growth of his brand, his community. And even, you'll like this. I was at, I did the Elevation event with Cardone and Williams and Tim Story and in Miami yesterday. I just came in for the day, red eye in, 8:58 flight out. But I ran into this guy that looked familiar, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "I do." I said, "But you have to forgive me because I don't know, with the thousands of interviews I do and the hundreds of in-person things I do a year." I said, I just can't place where I know you. And he said, "I met you at the Power Home Solar annual meeting in Myrtle Beach that you did." And he said, "That was Craig Siegel's first speech." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Yeah, I'm a big fan of both of yours." He said, "Man, has that guy come a long way." He said, "Can you help me? Because blah, blah, blah." And so I take that as the biggest compliment. But you got to show up. I don't think people know how much effort you put into showing up. And, I think it's an important lesson for everyone to know. It's not going to happen unless you show up in person, on the phone, via email, and in media.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you for that. And that's an awesome story too. That was the first one.
Yeah,
I remember some good lessons from that, and speaking to you right after.
Yeah, the biggest lesson that I learned or I witnessed there is always that 10% of the people love you no matter what, 10% hate you no matter what, and the other 80% don't give a shit. So that's why you have to be consistent, persistent in the pursuit of your potential.
Yeah, beautifully said. Awesome stuff. Love you, by the way. I want to hear about some of the good conversations you've had, maybe some Kabbalah stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll jump offline.
Sounds good.
It sounded like Julie was interested in that too.
Yeah. Ben was a good dude, and I've been studying Kabbalah for a long time, and I was excited when you got involved, and the other people in your team that are getting involved and learning about it. And it's funny because as resistant as I was to certain things in my spirituality, Julie was resistant, 17 years ago when I went down with Frank Murphy to the San Diego Kabbalah Center and started learning about the Zohar and the technology of the universe. And I love the mathematical and physical aspect of one of the originating philosophies that have put a different perspective on religion in the dogmatic religion. The only thing I thought is interesting, Craig, you'll like this because you know Kabbalah, is, one of the tenets of Kabbalah is that religion is not literal, right? And the dogmatic religions aren't literal. That's their philosophy. But yet Ben, the head of the Kabbalah Center in Manhattan, he wears a yarmulke, which is very dogmatic. And I wanted afterwards, I didn't get a chance to ask him. I'm like, dude, you're telling me that religion is not literal and that the dogmatic principles and practices aren't necessary, but you're sitting here wearing your yarmulke, which is a dogmatic symbol that you just told me is unnecessary. And so part of the hypocrisy of all philosophies, theories, religions, spirituality, part of the hypocrisy is that we can always question the practices of everything and everyone by taking it literally. And so even when he was talking about religions not being literal, I was creating hypocrisy in him being literal about religions not being literal. Now, as Snoop Dogg told me in these types of conversations, what he would say is, "That's deep, man." So,
That is deep. Well said. I love it. We'll dive deep into that for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's bring on our guest. I do not know where our first one is, Colin, but I do see our second one, Thais. So
yeah, man. Colin Brady's a good friend of mine. He probably heard I was on here and said, "F that. I've already been on 18 shows with David. I don't want to see him." So,
but Alex on the team, find out where Colin is. In the meantime, we'll bring on Thais.
Yeah, tell him I'm going to tell Jeremy Newsom the 2 R's if Colin blows us off. So he's probably in the Antarctic and lost his connection.
Yeah, he loves to explore, huh?
Yeah, man. He goes to the highest and lowest depths to push himself and understand human nature and the limitations of the infinite beings that we are. And Colin and Itzler and Newsom, those guys, they do shit I never want to do. I always say, if you want to challenge yourself, then have 4 kids. You don't have to go and score the earth for its highest and lowest points, and do ultra marathons and run an aggregate mile a day, 1 mile. I did this with Itzler and Colin during COVID for charity. They ran a mile a day and added a mile every day for a month. So they ran 1 mile day 1, 31 miles day 31. That's really hard, as you know, being a marathoner. So I told them I would help them. And so I ran 1 yard a day. I started with 1 yard. I ended with 31 yards. But I raised more money than both of them for the charity as well. So I love them both. And talking about upgrades, we just upgraded this show immensely.
Thais, how you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you both?
We're doing
amazing.
Great. But first and foremost, am I pronouncing your name right, Thais?
You are pronouncing it perfectly. That was well done. Nobody does it right the first time.
Isn't that true?
We're super pumped to have you here. Where are you dialing in from? Where are you today?
So I'm just outside of Toronto, Ontario. I'm a Canadian.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. What about both of you? Where are you sitting today?
I'm in Manhattan, and Dave is in...
I just landed in Orange County, California. So had a day trip to Miami, but I'm usually in seat 3B. So if you want to find me, I'm usually in seat 3B. You can just see me there.
Okay, perfect.
This is going to be so much fun. For our communities, if you're not familiar with Thais, do a deep dive, play catch up. I love the content that you speak about. I think it's so helpful. Let's just dive right in. One of the things that you talk about often is avoidant tendencies. I think all of us have it to some extent. How can somebody begin to identify their own avoidant tendencies?
It's such a great question. I think the first step actually begins with us being able to recognize our patterns in relationship dynamics. And so when we talk about our attachment style, really our attachment style is the relationship we have to ourselves first. So it's the type of relationship we bring into our romantic partnerships or who we're dating. It's the type of relationship dynamics we bring into our friendships, our family relationships, even our co-working relationships. And the big things you'll see specifically with an avoidant attachment style is you'll see that they tend to do a few key things. Number one, they have a tendency to kind of avoid conflict rather than be approach oriented and try to hash things out, resolve it, and really work through it. Number two, you'll see that they tend to be a little bit slower to warm up. Now, avoidant attachment styles, they tend to be very stoic on the outside and they won't really showcase their emotions too much, but they actually are very sensitive to criticism. They tend to take criticism deeply to heart. And part of the reason this happens is because avoidant attachment styles in childhood usually had the type of childhood where emotions weren't acceptable. So if a child was crying or distressed, the caregivers or parents might do things like, hey, go away and come back when you've got it together. Or they might just deflect or completely ignore their child when they're distressed. And so this child learns, okay, my emotions are bad or defective, like almost as if there's something wrong with me. So they'll really take those things to heart. And then as an adult, in their dating life specifically or relationships, they'll be the ones who they don't want to feel too much. So they may cut and run as soon as they have real feelings. They may get really afraid that they're going to get trapped in the wrong relationship. But a lot of these things are actually because they don't know how to work through conflict in healthy ways, and they don't know how to express and really manage their own emotional state.
The same frequency.
Yeah, of course, always the same frequency. And that avoidance also occurs with people that have suffered trauma in relationships. So they may have had a deep relationship, especially at a young age, and then that didn't work out because of some sort of abuse. And so now their protective ego, when they feel as if they're getting emotionally attached to someone, reminds them that this is a very hurtful situation, that there's a lot of danger. Just like innately when a saber-toothed tiger walked by a cave, the caveman said, oh shit, this is a very dangerous situation. I better figure this out. The same exact avoidance occurs within the context of human nature. And so I was wondering how I deal a lot not in fear itself. I've spent millions of dollars trying to figure out what I'm afraid of, and I started to realize past lives, womb trauma, infant trauma, toddler trauma, teenage trauma, 20s, 30s, 40s. Now I have 50s trauma. I can't figure out what I'm afraid of, but the instant and obvious is aligned with what you do and help people with, which is, what is my reaction to fear? The need to be right, offended, separate, inferior, superior, anxious, frustrated, angry, guilty. All of these reactions to fear are instant and obvious, and I don't need to spend millions of dollars on therapy or personal development in order to figure that out. But what I do have to figure out is something that you help people with, is when I react to fear, how can I get back to ease? When I create this dis-ease in my life, how can I get back to ease? What are some of the mechanisms and modalities and methodologies that you use to help people get back to center, back to ease when they've suffered these traumas and have these fears?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's two major things I focus on. So I try to really help people actually recondition the core fears that we have. So when we go through relationship dynamics, we all acquire different core fears from our childhood. And we call these core wounds from a cognitive behavioral therapy perspective. And so you'll see, for example, an anxious attachment style, their big core fears in relationships are things like, I will be abandoned, I will be alone, excluded, disliked, rejected, not good enough. And so you'll see that that really shapes their behavior. They spend a lot of their times in life trying to people please, trying to be accepted, trying to avoid being excluded or left out. And sometimes that's honestly at the expense of themselves. Sometimes that leads to, I will self-abandon just for acceptance from somebody else, which obviously becomes a maladaptive pattern in relationships. If you look at the other two avoidant attachment styles, so there's a fearful avoidant, to your point, David, that's a lot more associated with more severe trauma. That can be when there's abuse trauma and it's like, okay, we don't think relationships are even safe. This individual, the fearful avoidant, their big core fears are around betrayal and not being able to trust. Also around being abandoned or being trapped or being seen as unworthy. And so they'll spend a lot of their lives trying to prove their worth in the world and earn their worth, sometimes at the expense of themselves again. In this case, at the expense of burnout, not having boundaries around things they're trying to do just to earn their worth in the world. Now, if we look at the last major attachment style, or dismissive avoidant attachment style, what you'll see with the dismissive avoidant is, because they're the ones that really have that childhood emotional neglect, they'll spend a lot of time just keeping distance from people emotionally. And their big core fears are opening up too much and then being seen as weak, or defective because their emotions are not okay, and they feel shame around that. They have a lot of internalized shame, and they're really afraid of getting too close to people and then feeling engulfed or trapped. So we have these big core fears, but those fears are not things we're born with. Those are fears that get conditioned into us. They get fired and wired into our subconscious mind through repetition and emotion, because firing and wiring repeated emotion is actually what creates neural networks, neural pathways. So what I help a lot of people do, and I'm happy to sort of go into more in a minute, is recondition these neural networks so that we don't find ourselves repeating these same things over and over again. And I think one of the most challenging things that we often don't realize is that from each of our childhood dynamics, if we don't learn to rewire these core wounds, it's not that we had them and it was a traumatic event in childhood and that's so tragic. I mean, yes, that's not great. That's always difficult, but we all go through some form of trauma. It's the fact that we take them with us everywhere we go, all the time. We project them over and over again. Oh, I'm going to be betrayed again by somebody, and so now I can't trust anybody at all. Or, oh, I'm going to be abandoned again by somebody, so now I hold on way too tight and accidentally push people away. It's the fact that they go over and over and over again into every facet of our lives. It's the real tragedy, in my opinion. So I spend a lot of time doing the reconditioning work, and I'm happy to share a tool for anybody listening or an exercise. Okay, so let's do it. So
That's a
so
big
this
yes
tool,
immediately. We're like, please.
so this is one of my favorite tools, honestly, and it's so easy to do, but it has to have a little bit of backstory or context. So the first thing we have to realize is that when we have these core fears, they are not conscious, okay? They are subconscious. Nobody's choosing to wake up every day and say, I'm going to tell myself 100 times today I'm not good enough and see how I feel, right? That would be a conscious choice. So these are subconscious pre-existing conditioning, programming, same thing. So we have to speak to our subconscious mind if we're going to rewire these big core fears that we're carrying. Now, your conscious mind speaks language. Your conscious mind can understand language patterns. Your subconscious mind does not. And that's actually why I'm not a believer in affirmations, because if I say I am good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm just using my conscious mind to speak to my conscious mind. That's not really where the problem lies. So I need to speak to my subconscious. So step number one is to identify that core fear that we talked about. You know, we listed some off: the abandoned, alone, defective or shameful, excluded, disliked, rejected. So each person listening now, if you want to just hold in your mind whatever that big core fear is, that thing that comes up for you in relationships very often, okay? So step one, find the core fear and its opposite. So if it's I'm abandoned, I'll have connection. I am unsafe, I can be safe. I'm trapped, I'll have freedom. So we're just finding the opposite, okay? Step one. Step two, if we really want to rewire these fears, we have to speak in emotions and images. If I say to both of you, for example, whatever you do, do not think of the pink elephant. You probably thought of a pink elephant. It's called the ironic processing theory in psychology. Your conscious mind hears do not. Your subconscious mind just sees in images. It doesn't mess with the language patterns at all. So we have to leverage emotions and imagery, because that's how we use our conscious mind to communicate to our subconscious mind, and thus recondition whatever program is there or core fear that's working against us. So how do we do this? Well, the really interesting thing is that all memories are just a container of emotions and images. So if I were to say to you, okay, tell me your favorite childhood memory, and let's pretend for both of you it was playing on the playground with your friends as a kid, you would see the images of the playground. And we've all seen that when people recount old stories, they laugh or they smile or they cry, because memories actually contain images. So now we know that for step two of this exercise, we need 10 memories to oppose the core wound. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the core wound is I am not good enough. Opposite is I am good enough. We need 10 memories of specific times we actually did feel good enough. They don't have to be big. They don't have to be monumental. They just need to elicit a little bit of an emotional response, because that's enough to fire and wire new neural networks. So we need 10 memories, and they can be small things like yesterday I was a really good friend, or 3 days ago I worked really hard at something that scared me and I showed up for it. Little tiny things. We need 10 of them. Step three, we record it down into our phone or somewhere we can listen back to it. And we listen back to it for 21 days. You've probably all heard it takes 21 days to make a new habit. That's actually because it takes 21 days to hardwire new neural networks enough that they're likely to stick. So what this tool becomes in summary is 1, find your core wound if you want to get rid of that core fear. Number 2, find 10 pieces of memory to oppose the new idea. I am good enough. I am worthy. Number 3, once you have those 10 memories, record them, listen back for 21 days. It takes like 2 minutes a day. And you really want to focus when you're listening back on feeling the emotion and seeing the images, because that's how we're actually creating suggestibility to our subconscious mind. Now, this exercise is actually coming out of something called post-hypnotic suggestions, which is something that we can do to actually rewire our own subconscious from a background of hypnotherapy. Instead of going to a hypnotherapist for breakthroughs, we can just take this on ourselves on a daily basis.
One thing,
How's that for a Saturday morning breakthrough masterclass?
yeah, of course. I just want to point out, and for clarity as well, and dealing in the understanding of the conscious and the cellular structure and memory through consistent behavior and the way the cellular memory communicates with our own subconscious. And I want to point out to everyone, remember, our subconscious hopes about 40,000 different thoughts and same thoughts every single day. Unfortunately, about 80% of them are negative. And so even worse than them being negative is they're repetitive, which is why we have to think of these 10 things. One of the areas that a lot of people don't understand is beyond the conscious and subconscious lies our quantum being, our unconscious competency, a genetic and energetic inheritance, a code. And so if somebody, for example, has an addiction to alcohol, although it takes 21 days to form a neural pathway, that the overriding source of behavior is still our quantum being. So that's why people utilize, for example, the 12 steps or other different systems or methodologies in order to support an actual breaking of the chain of genetic or energetic inheritance, which lies in our code. But if you're not regulating the subconscious mind and creating more positive thoughts of I am instead of this is what I'm doing to interfere with what I am, we actually can shift our energy and shift our genetic codes through an epigenetic translator that says, okay, I have all of this enforced repetitive information. I'm now going to activate this part of your quantum genetics, your quantum energetics, an inheritance that could be infinite in its nature and far more powerful. So I think a lot of times people don't understand the differences between why our conscious behaviors are important of what we think, say, do, believe, and feel every day, how the subconscious mind is so critical to the repetitive nature of who we actually are, and how we can transform those into a positive divine direction. But in the context of divine time, the true ultimate change of self or cells, which is actually our self, in the context of that conscious continuum, it's all relative to the genetic and energetic inheritance that we actually do and can control and change. And it's people like you that are it's fascinating how empowering it is to others and how quickly you can change people's lives by helping them in that conscious continuum. So absolute pragmatic, simple genius. And thank you so much. I'm going to go back. People are asking, can you have the replay? Yes. Craig will make sure everybody gets the replay because that's gold.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
This is a masterclass in this stuff. Oh, damn. Thais, what were you about to say?
Pardon me?
You were about to say something. I cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think something else just to add into there right at the end of this is just your conscious mind can't outwill your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is responsible, your subconscious and unconscious collectively are responsible for 95 to 97% of all of your beliefs and thoughts and emotions and actions. And so when it comes to that, like to your point, David, if we're trying to rewire entire behaviors, like an unhealthy relationship to alcohol, there can be a lot more to it. But when it comes to those fears specifically that show up in our relationships, our lives, our livelihood, those are places where this 3-step solution works really well because it's really pointed to that core fear.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Just to land the plane, this is genius. Thank you for all this, Thais. You talk about
I think genius is the understatement.
Agreed. Thais, you talk often about how one of the biggest gifts is once we're triggered, right? Because if we get curious about our own triggers, then we can really do the work and figure out why it triggers us, and then we can be on the process to make lasting change. I think most people, when they're triggered, they avoid as to getting curious about it. But you want everybody, if you see something and it rubs you the wrong way, why? Why did that make you feel some type of way, right?
Absolutely. I really am a believer that everything that bothers us or irritates us is showing us to ourselves. And so everything that gets under our skin or triggers us, it's an opportunity. And if we have the capacity to be able to go, okay, well, what is this that's coming up for me? And if we know that we can rewire these triggers, then every time something shows up for us, rather than going down the rabbit hole of what we often do in our autopilot behaviors of being upset or angry or frustrated and just going down the path of maybe you were triggered by traffic in the morning, and then you get to work and you're upset for the first 3 hours of your day, and you tell all your coworkers how awful your morning was. Like, you just wasted so much of your own time by doing that. If instead you're sitting in traffic and you're triggered and you're able to say, why is this frustrating me so much? And ask a very specific question, which is a great question to pull up what our specific trigger is. What am I making this mean? Or what am I afraid will happen? And if you ask yourself that question, you actually gain insight into your own subconscious mind. And you may say, you know what am I making this mean? I'm sitting in traffic. I'm making this mean I feel trapped. And if you look back and you say, do I have a history of feeling trapped on and off throughout my life? You'll usually find these threads and these very clear parallels. And then we can say, oh, great, I have this core fear of being trapped. Time to use that 3-step tool, that auto suggestion tool, to rewire this condition. And what happens as a result of that is the next time that you're in traffic after that 21 days, you're not feeling the same way. And this is something I've personally done, and we've done with over 40,000 students through our programs. And people actually in self-paced programs report an 88.7% success rate at rewiring core wounds. That's people who you can't even tell if they stuck to the 21 days or not. And this is something I've personally done, and it has changed my experience so much because I was a fearful avoidant attachment style. I had all these core wounds from childhood trauma, and I really buckled down and did this work. And it's such an easy thing for people to do, and it will really move the needle on your life experience and help you break through glass ceilings, because these core wounds are also what our limitations are in life as well.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, so it's so funny because just recently, I've always told people that when I speak or other people, all the content out there, make sure you only capture what resonates with you. And I made the mistake of keeping it to the positive. You know, like if I say something like, you're either humble or you're about to be, and that resonates with you, you know, a positive statement, you should capture it, create a system to access it, to remind, remember, and recollect of your higher self. And it just recently, I started to encourage people to capture what resonates with them in the respect of the reaction to fear that bothers you the most. Like, why is it that, you know, this political figure bugs the shit out of you? Why are you like so traumatized, you know, by what is said in some opposing opinion of what you may or may not think you have? And it's actually so valuable. And I love the questions to ask, because we do have the power to give meaning to everything we see. And so if we ask ourselves about that meaning, knowing that we can't find outside of us, whether it's traffic or OCD, alcoholism, other people's opinion, we can't find outside of us what we don't see inside of us. And to be able to ask those questions is so critical in what we do. And through that exploration, I just, you know, it was amazing. I grew up with 6 kids in food insecurity, single mom, and it's amazing how it was applicable that I needed control to know that I was going to be fed. And this is really weird, but it would cause me, even though I can afford to eat, and I, you know, I had to finish everybody's plate, and I was worried, so I'd overeat at night, that there may not be food tomorrow, and all these weird things that make no logical sense. And I want to repeat something you said, because I'm sure it passed by. You can't out logic emotion, right? The conscious mind and the subconscious has no morality either, right? There's no good or bad. And so these different labels and understanding of the subconscious mind in continuum with what you teach is critical. These breakthroughs, you know, a simple thing of having food insecurity when I was a child wanting to be responsible for my family at 5 years old, how that manifests and amplifies itself into a fact that, you know, I wanted control, so I was a neat freak. And then I got over that. And now, whenever I experience this insecurity or chaos, I immediately have to have control. And to make me feel safe that there's going to be food tomorrow, even though logically that makes no sense. And I want people to really delve into your content, because this is life-changing stuff. And what your work that you're doing and the way that you explain it is not an easy thing. I always say the simple things to do are unfortunately simple not to do. And the simpler it is, the more powerful and the more depth it has, including two words that you and I use a lot. In 11th grade AP English, my teacher told me, I am. And I told him, I get it. Now I'm 56 years old, and I spend the majority of my time doing research, elevating my awareness and understanding to those three letters, those two words of I am. And I think if you want to explore I am to its fullest capacity, please delve into this content, because it's going to change everyone's life. And I know we went over time, Craig, and it's your honeymoon, but thank you so much. The work you're doing is incredible, and I have prepared a fireworks show for you out of appreciation.
Thank you both so much for having me. It's an honor and a blessing to chat with you both today, and I really appreciate being here.
This was actually the perfect morning conversation. Real quick before we jump, Thais, what's the best place for our community to maybe get involved or support, or is there something that you're really excited about right now?
So the best place is probably at personaldevelopmentschool.com. I have a school. I wrote over 60 courses there, and everything is personal development for your subconscious mind. So it all has a rewiring component to it. And people can also take an attachment style quiz there if they want to know what their attachment style is in relationships.
Good idea. Love that. And Uncle Dave, where are you going to be? Where are you traveling?
I'm going to Chicago Monday, Boston Tuesday, back to Chicago and South Dakota Wednesday and Thursday, and then to SoFi Stadium on Friday. Seat 3B is where you can find me, but if you want, there's internet on the planes now, so email me directly, david@dmeltzer.com. I do still give my book, sign it, send it, pay for shipping, and the book, trying to, on a mission, like these two beautiful souls, empower others to empower others, to make a lot of money, help a lot of people, and have a lot of fun. In other words, be joyful and happy, passionate, purposeful, and profitable in your journey. I appreciate the time that both of you have taken. God bless you.
Love you both.
God bless you both.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thais will connect offline.
Me too.
Love you. Better see you in person, but I love you both. Have a good weekend.
World needs more of you, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.